Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to the TAFE NSW update on the EQUELLA implementation journey. I'd like to say that it's great to be here for the third Navigate conference and see the growing EQUELLA community. My name is Khabbaz, as Simon introduced us, and I'm the director of the TAFE NSW e-learning hub. I'll give you a brief update on the current New South Wales VET environment and the very real challenges facing our organisation and the VET sector nationally. My colleagues James Humffray and Irvin Flack will outline how the EQUELLA ecosystem continues to thrive despite those daunting challenges. I know Dan had the bridge analogy, we were having the ecosystem analogy, but I won't push the analogy as far as Dan has pushed it. First of all, I'll give you a brief snapshot of the size and reach and the footprint of TAFE New South Wales, and you'll agree with me that some of those stats are quite daunting. We've got 10 TAFE New South Wales institutes spread over the whole state in 135 campuses. We've got 23,000 teachers overall, about 70% of whom are part-time teachers, which means we say we have over 10,500 full-time equivalent teaching staff. We've got over 4,000 support staff across the state and over 500,000 student enrollments. We don't talk about student numbers because in those enrollments some students enroll more than one course. And we offer over 1,200 courses nationally, ranging from Certificate 1 to Advanced Diploma. Of those 500,000 enrollments or more, these are the stats for 2011 by the way, there are 43,000 apprentices and about 15,000 trainees. So we're talking massive numbers of students. And this is a snapshot of where the 135 colleges or campuses are located across the state. Alright, I talked about challenges facing the VET sector. And those challenges are both national and state agendas driving VET reform and overall tightening of skills funding. The first one is the COAG agenda with a revised national agreement on skills and workforce development. The COAG, as you know, the Council of Australian Governments, in April 2012 negotiated with the states, the state ministers, to provide $7.2 billion of funding nationally over the next 4 financial years and set aspirational targets to 2020. And some of them are halving the proportion of Australians nationally aged between 20 to 64 with lower than Cert 3 qualifications between 2009 and 2020, as I said. So we've got to halve the number of people who don't have Certificate 4 nationally, and we've got to double the number of higher level qualification completions. So diploma and advanced diploma, again, nationally. So that's a hefty target, it's aspirational, as I said, but how are we, now that we are also, as a VET sector, moving to the higher education and delivering higher education courses, how are we going to meet those targets to access some of that funding? The second national driver is the National Partnership on Skills Reform. Again, at that April 2012 COAG meeting, there was an agreement that $1.75 billion be spent on the reform in the VET sector, but it's less funding overall. However, we've got to negotiate the funding. We've got to set targets, we've got to report against those targets, and we've got to have state implementation plans to access the funding. As you can see, these are some of the targets. I won't go into too much detail into that. I'll go back to the ASQA. The third challenging aspect is the move from a state-based regulatory environment to a national regulatory environment with the Australian Skills Quality Authority, or ASQA, being created. ASQA's task is to regulate courses and training providers to ensure nationally improved quality standards are met. The difference between the previous state-based regulatory environment and the national one is that the national one is enshrined in legislation and has authority to close RTOs. Another national driver, which I'm not really going to get into here, is the move to the AQF levels, Australian Quality Framework, which created an outcomes-based model and allow TAFE New South Wales and other VET providers to move into the higher education sector. So again, the blurring of boundaries between VET and higher education is has a major impact on our delivery. Okay, the state agenda. In 2011, a document was released. That was deleted. The Smart and Skilled Making New South Wales #1 was a consultation document released by the government, which fundamentally changes the TAFE New South Wales funding paradigm. It's about entitlement funding. So whereas the money used to go to the TAFE organisation on enrolments, for example, now the funding is kind of given to the students, and they can go and choose the provider they want, whether it's a private or a public provider. Now, because the final sign-off on New South Wales Smart and Skilled hasn't happened, it was meant to happen in June, then in July, the minister's holding off, or actually proceeding with caution is the official line, because we're very closely watching the developments in the VET sector in Victoria before signing off on what that entitlement funding would mean for us and what it would look like. And against the continuum of publicly funded to full entitlement funding, we're not quite sure whether we go to the extreme or just one notch below. Again, part of that New South Wales Smart and Skilled is greater autonomy for an individual student or learner to choose their training provider. Part of it is also funding on completions, whereas before we were funding on enrolments, we will now be funded on completions, possibly partially or fully, we're not quite sure, and that's what we're waiting for the minister to sign off on. And that will mean a whole review of our business model and the way we operate as a TAFE New South Wales and as the 10 TAFE institutes. Another driver at the state level is the New South Wales budget, which was handed down in May 2012. For people from other states, as you know, we've had a change of government. So this is the first budget which outlines severe funding cuts for across the government and the public sector in general, but very specifically for TAFE as a VET provider. There's also a decision by the TAFE New South Wales government to reduce labour cap across all government organisations. So the number of public service employees will be reduced significantly. The third driver is the New South Wales Commission of Audit final report released on the 9th of August. It's about government expenditure effectiveness and efficiency. I won't go into the 132 recommendations, of course, but what it will mean for us is that there is increased autonomy for the 10 TAFE institutes to operate as businesses, which means less funding for central support units such as the ones we work in, the three of us, the TAFE New South Wales e-learning hub or learning systems, and greater decision-making power at the local level in institutes. That's a quick brushstroke of what's happening at the national level and at the state level. The key points for us is that we are moving in more contestability of funding, more contestable markets, and that we have to change our business model to look at completions and progressions of students, not just enrollments. So things like learner analytics, how do we track students throughout their study, etc., will become more and more important for us. And also the blurring of boundaries with the higher education sector. Now, how does all that relate to the EQUELLA implementation? Briefly and as a snapshot, in December 2009, TAFE New South Wales signed a licensing agreement to procure EQUELLA as the learning content management system, which is part of a suite of tools in our virtual learning environment roadmap. Since then, in addition to a move from initial external hosting to internal hosting, which was quite a painful exercise, by the way, extensive change management activities, including capability building, certification training, and mentoring schemes have been implemented and continue to be implemented. Finally and briefly, the success of this implementation has resulted in over 22,000 resources or objects in 70 separate collections, thriving in an abundant ecosystem that James will describe in more detail. And for the more technically minded, Irvin will deep dive into the world of metadata challenges we've had to face and continue to face. Without further ado, I'll hand over to James, both the presentation and the
Thanks, Diana. at last year's conference I was channeling James Bond, for those who saw my presentation. This year I'm channeling Gilligan. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be talking about our thriving ecosystem, all the different collections we have. We have over 20,000 resources now after 3 years of implementation of EQUELLA. The main area where you might think, oh, it's the collections. We have over 70 collections. That's a lot of collection to have, but there are reasons behind that. And one is because we have 10 institutes. One way of trying to get institute buy-in originally was to give institutes control over their resources and collections. And that was giving them the ability to create collections. And we also have a number of central units as well, so who are creating resources and needing those and something repository to help distribute those resources. The main collections that we have are the learning resource materials collections. Every institute has one of these collections, plus there is a TAFE-wide resource collection as well. It's within these collections that our teachers are uploading resources into. They've got the capability to contribute into these collections. I'd say about 2/3 of our resources are in these collections. They've got a number of workflow around them as well. We've involved our librarians as well, so we've created workflows so they can do a quality assurance on these resources. We've just implemented that for a number of institutes, and I'm working with those institutes to help roll out other the same workflow to have the librarians involved in that process. We've also got a copyright process as well, so we've involved librarians in the process of checking for copyright as well. That's not across the board yet, so we're still working with institutes to implement those. We've also created a lot of image library collections. Now the learning resource collections have a lot of images in them as well, but they're for learning for delivery. These are specific image collections as well, and it's mainly our librarians who have actually created these collections. They've got a collection that they're managing. It may be a historical image library collection, or maybe just a marketing collection. But we've and this, the image we've got here is an image from Sydney Institute Ultimo College, which is the first TAFE college, it's a ladies drawing class. Close your eyes everyone. One of the central units is the TAFE Learning Hub, which Diana and Irvin work for, and they've produced a graphics collection. So these are graphics icons which can be used for web development purposes or for using in documents. So, and it's available to all teachers to use these icons, and there are over about 170 different icons altogether. There are 5 different colours and 4 different sizes. So you can see the icon on the left here is a conversation style icon. Comes in 4 sizes from large, medium, small and very small, and different colours as well, so they can be used. That's right, there's no copyright issues with that because it's all designed internally. Oops, we're done. Some institutes have actually developed their own promotion and marketing collections as well. And this is the Sydney Institute promotional collection, and they're keeping their marketing posters, flyers, brochures as well. So they've kept it away from the learning resource area, and it's just purely for marketing purposes. And as you can see, the libraries are quite involved with our EQUELLA implementation, and they've been able to, we've trained up a lot of librarians to manage their own library e-resources, and these are the library subscription databases, so things such as EBSCO, ProQuest, Gale, vLearn, Safety Care style resources. Now this collection, we have a central library unit which purchases and manages statewide resources. These are managed through the TAFE library catalogue. These library collections are for those that are those institute subscriptions, so they're not part of the statewide licences, and so the library's been some tool to help them manage permissions for these resources. So the libraries have negotiated with a lot of the vendors to get the open URLs, and they've actually put them into their own collections. So each institute has their own library e-resource collection at the moment. Another resource that Diana's unit has created is a tool called Loco. It's a learning object composer, and it can be used for creating assessment, quick assessment questions. When it was developed, they created a whole collection for it, but I think now you can actually contribute these resources into different collections. But at the moment, there is a collection there for these resources. And one of my roles is to work with central units and to find out what are their needs and help them develop collections. And I'm working with another central unit to create assessment questions as well. So they're just individual questions that are put on a Word document or PDF and uploaded. We're looking forward to future versions of EQUELLA, hopefully with the shopping cart facility, so that we're sort of preparing for that, so that in future teachers will be able to find the questions they want, select them using the shopping cart, and then export them in some format. They can either HTML or a Word document. As higher education institutions are getting into the TAFE space, we've decided we'll get into the higher ed space as well. So TAFE is now delivering diploma and associate diploma and degree courses as well. So we have a separate higher education collection at the moment. So this is considered as one institution across all TAFE New South Wales. There are permissions on this collection so that only those teachers who are delivering a higher ed course can actually access these resources because of the accreditation issues. And at the moment, the students can only access these resources through a Moodle course, so we're using the shared secrets set up between EQUELLA and Moodle. We have a number of specialist collections as well for some third-party resources, and the example we've got here is Futura resources, which are like hospitality-style courses. In the early days, it was because we have so many institutes working on their own collections, it was a bit hard to integrate all these other item types into our collection, so they actually created a whole new collection for it, and it was much easier for the institutes to manage permissions for that. So we have a Futura collection. I think a number of institutes have their own licenses for Futura, and we're helping to get other things set up in that regard as well. This Riverina Seed Bank collection is an interesting one because this is the only collection we have where students are actually contributing resources. This is Riverina have an Aboriginal horticultural course, and these students are required to go out into the bush, take photographs of seeds, and they come back and they submit these resources into EQUELLA, into this collection, and then they have to submit metadata to do with that. And they're basically building up like a little Wikipedia of resources. So it's got a whole set of metadata based on botanical metadata. So it's species, genus, family, and also food uses, habitat, and other special metadata fields. So it's been very successful. There's about 54 resources in there now, so it's been done over 2 years. So it's a small collection, but it's 2 years worth of students who contribute to that. And for compliance issues, TAFE has to deal with validating our assessments. And so a number of institutes got together to create an assessment validation process where the assessments have to be validated by peers as well as by industry groups. And the institutes got together, they created this workflow process which has been set up as a separate collection within EQUELLA. And part of my job is to work with institutes to say that this collection is now available and you can use it. And the institutes are either using it as a separate collection, so we can clone it for that institute, or we're merging it into our learning resource collections, so that as soon as the item type assessment is selected, it will start this workflow process. And this process allows the teacher then to select either their head teacher or someone who they can get to validate that assessment, and the head teacher can then approve or reject comments, send it on to the industry validator as well. Just about to hand over to Irvin. There's a couple of other collections which I haven't mentioned yet. One is a historical collection as well. So we have another institute that's developed historical, scanned newspaper clippings, historical clippings. It's another collection as well. And we've also set up a lot of training collections as well. So these were initially set up originally to help teachers to help the learning units at each institute to train staff. However, that was a bit problematic because the teachers just want to put resources straight into the learning resource, the main collection. So institutes weren't using the TAFE, the training collections. We didn't want to fill up the main collections with test resources or basically crap resources and ruin the quality of the collection. Some institutes now, though, are going back to a training collection as well. So they've got special groups that can contribute to that. Like a training group that can contribute to that collection, and when they're doing their training, they actually manually move those accounts into that training group to give those teachers access to that collection for that training period. So they're all the examples of the types of collections that we have, and you can see with 10 institutes across all those different types of collections, that builds up to about 70 collections. So we are hoping that there's lots of challenges, especially for me, to help get consistency across those collections. So I'm working with institutes to start merging some collections, and as our capability increases, where institutes are thinking, yes, we're ready to merge collections now, or they're seeing the possibilities of more complex processes and workflows. So it's been an interesting journey for the last 3 years. Okay, so I'll now hand over to Irvin. Oh, sorry.
Thanks. In the remaining time, I'm just going to talk about the metadata challenges that our thriving ecosystem presents us. It's going to talk about 3 issues we have. Firstly, achieving metadata consistency across our repository with all these different collections and institutes, but at the same time allowing the institutes to be autonomous. Dealing with changes to our metadata specs, which we've been doing recently, and trying to maintain quality of metadata. So the consistency problem is that we have 10 autonomous institutes. We've got over 70 collections, and for lots of different purposes, as James has shown you. And we also have 3 different metadata schemas underpinning it for our learning resources, library resources, and for images. So that can lead to confusion. So just some examples of the sort of things that we're confronting. We sometimes have, with all our different schema nodes, we've got 2 nodes for the same concept, so that collections can be using different nodes when they're actually describing the same thing, such as author. In other cases, individual nodes can look nice and generic, so people say, oh, I'm going to use it for this purpose, and someone else will say, oh, I'm going to use it for another different purpose. And then we have different vocabularies for some nodes, such as learning resource type in different institutes. So this makes it really hard to do things like do advanced searches across content, and it also really means we end up with potentially silos within our repository. So what I'm doing at the moment is doing a big review of all our schemas and going back to first principles with them, making sure that we're sticking to national and international standards wherever possible, and if a node hasn't been used, which interestingly some of them haven't since we started in 2009, then I'm going to suggest we get rid of them so it will reduce confusion. Well, the other thing we've been doing is extending the schemas in a logical way. So with higher ed, we've needed to come up with new vocabularies for higher ed, so they've been slotted into the classification section and given meaningful names so that people who are administrators know what they're looking at. And also we have a lot of collaboration because we've got so many different institutes spread across the state. We have a fortnightly EQUELLA admins meeting done with Adobe Connect, so it's a web conferencing which James hosts, and we can discuss issues like this. And we're also promoting collaboration between the institutes, so that the assessment validation collection was done by collaboration of institutes. And the copyright page, the new copyright page is being rolled out at the moment across the institutes at the same time. Now, because we sometimes have second thoughts about our metadata, we then have the problem of what to do with the existing items which were done in the old way. And we've had this quite a bit recently with, for example, we changed our learning resource type vocabulary. We're mucking around with the units of competency node, and also with changes to how we handle item visibility, which is important for us. So that means an institute can restrict who can see their items. So all these are really important issues, and when we make a change to the underlying spec, we have to make sure that we update everything. So what I've found is a great tool is the EQUELLA metadata utility, or EMU. I don't know if other people have been using that, as well as scripting, expert scripting. But I find it's been a fantastic way to go through collections and update them to new specs. And then lastly, on metadata quality, sort of issues we're looking at are incomplete metadata, so people not putting in, everyone's rushed for time, they might put in a very brief description, they might forget to align their item to a unit of competency, or training package, which is really critical for our teachers and students to have that sort of information. Sometimes they might put in typos or select the wrong value for whatever reason. And also, I think the hardest one to deal with is inconsistency in the way people enter metadata, especially things like titles. One person might do it a different way to another, ends up with completely different looking titles. So all this makes it harder to find our content. So what we're trying to do is approach this in a few different ways. James has already mentioned the workflow approach. So Western Sydney Institute have started this idea of having a metadata review step by librarians, which I think has been working pretty well. The librarians have been embracing that, so that's been good. The other thing I've been doing is making sure we have guidelines for contributors, and obviously I'm building on the standards, the long standard in particular, and for our vet materials. But if we are coining new values and so on, making sure that we've got definitions of what we're talking about, so that people know exactly what we mean when we say an implementation guide, for example. So all this is documented, and what we've done in some cases is actually incorporate this into the templates, into the wizards. And so, for example, learning resource type, which is the first control that the contributors have to fill out, they can get help and actually see what each of those types means, so they assign the right one. And we're also using collaboration again to help improve quality. So we have a Moodle site we call eCommunities, which the eHub runs, and it is used as a space for collaboration and communication across TAFE. So we have an EQUELLA page with a forum on it where people are daily adding issues, discussing problems. And I maintain a metadata space which we're using to communicate about metadata and guidelines and so